This video is sponsored by my brand new music theory course available now at artmaster.com. It's not that uncommon for a songwriter to write more than one song using a particular chord progression. They might write 3, 4, maybe even 5 songs using the exact same order of chords. However, Taylor Swift takes this to a whole new level. There are particular chord progressions that she has used in more than 20 of her songs. It seems to be a habit of hers to come back to these same common and reliable chord progressions to write hit after hit. So today I want to look at what these chord progressions are. What are these favourite chord progressions of Taylor Swift that she keeps using in her music? So what I've done is gone through every song that Taylor Swift has ever released, looked at the chord progression and taken note of which chord progressions come up more than once. And that gave me this list of chord progressions. So as you can see, looking at the bottom half of the list, some of these chord progressions are already being used 8 different times, which by most songwriters' standards would be a lot. But that pales in comparison to the top half of this list, where some of these chord progressions are being used more than 20 times. So now let's take a look at Taylor Swift's top 5 favourite chord progressions, starting at number 5 with 4, 1, 5, 6, which in the key of C major would be F, C, G and A minor.
My town was a wasteland, full of cages, full of fences, pageant queens and pretenders. Sleeping eyes wide open, I got one thing stuck in my mind. We called it off again last night, but hey, all you had to do was hit the stand, you could be in the palm of your hand. It's me.
I think the first interesting thing about this chord progression is that it doesn't start on the 1 chord, it starts instead on the 4 chord, which instantly sets us off with a sense of momentum. We need to move somewhere. We can't stay on 4 because it's unresolved. We need to get back home to our tonic chord. But of course we don't want to stay resolved forever, so then we move to our 5th chord of the key, which brings back that sense of tension, and then we resolve again, but this time to the 6th chord, which is also a tonic function chord, but has that minor feel instead. It doesn't feel as fully resolved as the normal tonic chord with number 1, C major in the key of C. So returning to our list, Taylor Swift's 4th most common chord progression is 6, 4, 1, 5, or in the key of B flat major, that would be G minor, E flat, B flat, F.
I'm alone on my own, and that's all. Think about it now. Each year was beautiful, flying in a dream, stars by the pocketful. You wanted me tonight, but it's impossible. Come on, don't leave me like in a little heartbeat when you're not around. Never be so kind, forget to be clever.
We start on the 6th chord of the key, which sets us off in that minor space, that Aeolian sound. Moving to the 4th chord of the key means we get that sense of tension because we've got the subdominant chord, which is unresolved. Then that sound resolves by moving to the tonic chord of B flat in this example. And then because we want that momentum to keep going, we don't stay on our tonic chord where it sounds resolved. We now move to our dominant chord, the 5th chord of the key, which brings that sense of tension back again. So those first 2 chord progressions were used 9 different times across Taylor Swift's songwriting. But now we're getting into the main offenders. Taylor Swift's 3rd most common chord progression has been used in 17 of her different songs. It is the chord progression 1, 6, 4, 5, or in the key of C major, that would be C, A minor, F, and G.
When the dinner is cold and the chatter gets old, you ask for the time. I can still feel you in my hand. I'm not the one man, and even the moment I knew I'm 5 years old. something now. Boy, I enjoy walking Camden, walking in the afternoon. And when you find everything you look for, I hope your love leads you back to my goal. Oh my God, look at that face. You look like my next mistake. What's the game? Wanna play?
Just like the other chord progressions we've had so far in this video, this 1, 6, 4, 5 chord progression is a very common chord progression indeed. So common that it has its own name. It's often known as the doo-wop changes or the 50s chord progression, because this 1, 6, 4, 5 was used loads in 50s and early 60s doo-wop music, to the point of cliche. But it hasn't just been used in that style of music. It was used long before that, and it has been used long since that. And as we can see, Taylor Swift often comes back to this chord progression, and for good reason. It's a very powerful yet simple chord progression. We start on the 1 chord with that sense of full resolution, tonic chord. Then we move to the 6th chord of the key, which is also a tonic function chord, but with a different light to it. It's like the minor side of that tonic resolution. So we're still resolved, but then we get the movement, which is moving to the subdominant chord, the 4th chord, which introduces some tension to the music. And then we move to the most tense chord of the key, which is the 5th chord of the key, the dominant chord. And that resolves nicely back to our tonic chord, number 1, C major. As you can see, I'm no longer in my usual backdrop, and that's because I'm actually in Prague filming a course, a music theory course with Artmaster. Many of you over the years of me making these videos have mentioned that you would really benefit from a music theory course that goes from the absolute beginning of music theory and builds up step by step. So that's what I've created, and I'm really proud of it. I think it's a great way of understanding music theory and learning it in a logical way where you're building that foundation, and I'm sure it will even allow you to get more and more out of my videos. So if you're interested in learning more about the course, then do have a look at the links in the description. So the last 2 chord progressions on this list have been used 20 times and 21 times respectively. I think you'd struggle to find another songwriter who's used a particular chord progression this often. You're probably already making some guesses at what these last 2 chord progressions are, so let's look at Taylor Swift's second favourite chord progression, which is 1, 5, 2, 4, or in the key of G major, that would be G, D, A minor, C.
Say you'll remember me, standing in a nice dress, staring at the sunset, babe. Say yes, run away you shout. I'll meet you when you're out of the church at the back door. Are you right? It's Superman anyway. You got a busy day tonight. Causing sounds of rough. I wonder if you know I'm trying so hard not to get caught up now. There's a fire inside of you that can't help but shine through. The whole time if you could see that I'm the one who understands you. Goodbye, you were bigger than the whole sky. You belong with me. Run, baby. I know places we won't be found when this love is treacherous, and I still like it. I don't wanna look at anything else now that I saw you. Like I want more time to be. I don't wanna think of anything else now that I thought of you. You were driving the getaway car. We were flying, but we never get far. Letting go, and no one knows.
This is a chord progression that I refer to as the Believe chord progression because it was used in Cher's song Believe. Just like all the other chord progressions on this list so far, It stays fully within the key, it's fully diatonic, and it loops round beautifully. We start on the tonic chord, in this example G, then we move to the 5th chord of the key, the dominant. So that sends us straight off into the realm of tension. We now need to go somewhere, we can't stay here. So we move to the A minor chord, which is a subdominant function chord. And then we climb up to the 4th chord of the key, the C, which is also a subdominant function chord. So both of those chords have the same function, but with a different flavour to it. And we get that very clear sense of climbing up because we're going from the 2nd chord of the key to the 4th chord of the key. So I'm pretty sure many of you would have already guessed what the number 1 chord progression on Taylor Swift's list is here. But if you haven't, well, it's the classic 1, 5, 6, 4, or in the key of C major, C, G, A minor, F.
'Cause there we are again on that little town street. You almost ran the red 'cause you were looking worthy. And it was good, baby. It was good, baby. Showed your name. No one could touch the way we booked the night train for a reason. Teardrops on my guitar. Sit there in this verse. And I should say, jump from the train, like right off alone. Never grew up, it's getting so old. Help me hold on to you. Once upon a time, a few mistakes ago, I was in your sights. You got me going down when I was drowning. That's when I could finally breathe. As good as love is, bad as love is, a light back from the dead. And put a ring up on your door. Things will change. You lifted my feet off the ground. To every tear that thought was on my tongue. Oh, what a shame, what a rainy end and get into the perfect day. And marry me truly, and you never have to be alone. I love you, and that's all I really love. Talk to your dad, oh, pick out a white dress. It's a love story, baby, just say yes.
This chord progression has been used countless times by so many artists, particularly in the last 20 years. So it's really no surprise that this is Taylor Swift's favourite chord progression. And of course, I've explained before why this chord progression is so effective, but let's have a look at it again. We start on the tonic chord, clearly setting out our home, our key. This is in the key of C, so this is C. We then move to the dominant chord. That introduces tension, which needs to resolve somewhere. So we move to the 6th chord of the key, A minor, which has tonic function, but a minor type of tonic function, so it's not fully resolved. Then we once again get a bit of tension, this time in the form of the subdominant chord, the F chord. And that tension resolves back to where we started our C chord, and we can just keep looping round from there. So those are Taylor Swift's favourite chord progressions. And I think it's very easy to look at this and think this is a very boring or a very lazy approach to songwriting. But there's also an element of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Taylor Swift is obviously a very successful artist, and she obviously hasn't been hampered by the fact that she keeps using the same chord progression. If anything, that might be one of the selling points of her music. If you enjoy these chord progressions, then even though the songs might all start sounding quite similar, if you like the sound of that chord progression, then that won't necessarily be a complaint for you. It always makes you think of rock and roll music or blues music, which always falls back on that common 12-bar blues chord progression. So much so that it's basically baked into the style. So you could make the same argument for Taylor Swift's music, that these chord progressions are part of the genre of Taylor Swift. Also, I saw a comment on one of my recent videos, the one about the axis of force from chord progression, saying that in many ways Taylor Swift's music is about the lyrics more so than the music. So the music, i.e. the chord progression, is almost serving as a sort of foundation and an emotional bed to then tell a story on top of. And that makes sense when you look at the amount of times she's fallen back on these same chord progressions. If you look at one of Taylor Swift's most famous and fan favourite songs, All Too Well, she is basically just telling a story over a loop of that classic 1-5-6-4 chord progression. And that song is so popular that when she re-recorded it a couple of years ago, she actually released a 10-minute version of it, which is even more popular than the original 3 or 4 minute version. So it's one of those things where maybe it's not for you, but some people like this repurposing of the same chord progression. Chord progressions are ultimately like colours. They are sets of colours that we can use as a foundation to create something more. A chord progression alone is not a song, and therefore recycling the same chord progression isn't necessarily a bad thing.